Audio note. Start of Chapter 15. The revelation of the Eclipse-born Ron stood steady before the broker, presenting the details of his investigation like pieces of a puzzle. Maps, survivor accounts, strategic notes from Havenford, all meticulously compiled and delivered with precision. Yet, despite the thoroughness of the facts, his next move completely broke the pattern of logic. He didn't ask a question. Instead, he uttered a single, cryptic word: Eclipse-born. The broker's amused smile faltered for a fraction of a second, just enough for Ron to notice. Then, the man chuckled, a low, ancient sound that barely escaped his lips as he leaned back. "Ha," he drawled, shaking his head with genuine amusement. "Out of all the questions you could have asked. I didn't expect that. Well, Sir Ron, I'm looking forward to the information or payment you'll share with us." And with that, the broker began to fade, his figure dissolving like mist under moonlight. The magic was subtle, elegant, and strange, leaving Ron to marvel at the theatricality of it all. Before the man disappeared entirely, something small glinted on the desk, a token, cool and smooth to the touch, round and etched with the logo of a crescent moon. Ron reached for it cautiously, turning it over in his palm. It wasn't clear what the token represented: membership, communication, or something else entirely. But he understood one thing: it was meant for him. And more importantly, the broker's cryptic disappearance had confirmed his suspicions. The connection to the Eclipse-born was undeniable. Flashback. The Eclipse-born Ron's mind flashed back to fragments of his earlier research. In dusty libraries and forgotten archives, he had uncovered traces of the Eclipse-born, an enigmatic group tied to the Shadow God, the Lord of Mystery. Unlike the Luminaries or Elemental factions, the Eclipse-born were never known for their military might. Instead, they wielded the power of shadow magic and specialized in information, serving as spies, assassins, and gatherers of secrets. Though not directly involved in the Malice Bloom War, their contributions to the old leaders of the era were invaluable. The divinants among them were feared for their precision and secrecy, operating in the darkest corners of the world. And when the Shadow God disappeared, the group fractured, their members scattering into anonymity. Some pledged loyalty to the Luminaries. Others served powerful figures within the warrior faction and elementalists. But their secrecy grew stronger with time, and in the present era, almost no one knew their affiliations, or their purpose. Returning to reality as the flashback faded, Ron tucked the token safely into his pocket, its weight strangely comforting. This is business, he thought to himself. Not membership, but a partnership. He couldn't afford to ask the deeper questions yet, questions about the Sorrow Fiends or the Malice Bloom's origins, but he was glad nonetheless. Today's encounter had answered something else entirely. The Eclipse-born weren't just a myth. Feeling both motivated and strangely fulfilled, Ron quickly left the coffee shop and headed toward the Elder's residence. He needed to thank Elder Vaughn, pronounced Vaughn, for his efforts and acknowledge the importance of the mission ahead. The newfound connection to the Eclipse-born was thrilling, but it was just another piece of the larger puzzle, the ultimate goal of stopping the Malice Bloom. Hurrying to Marcus, Ron's sense of urgency was palpable as he arrived at their room, finding Marcus already tending to their packed supplies. "We're leaving," Ron announced without hesitation, his tone sharp and excited. Marcus didn't even complain, as if he had anticipated this exact moment. With a tired but amused look, he gestured toward their gear. "Everything's ready. You just had to do your mysterious thing first, didn't you?" Ron smirked, tapping his pocket where the token rested. Let's just say it was worth it. Together, the duo prepared to depart Havenford, the road ahead leading straight to Windmere. Whatever awaited them there, Ron was ready to face it, armed not just with facts, but with the beginnings of something much larger than he had ever expected. On the road, theories in motion, the carriage rattled steadily along the uneven northern paths, pulled by Baron and Grandee, their armored forms unwavering despite the journey's demands. Inside the carriage, Ron sat hunched over a rough sketch of a flowchart, meticulously connecting threads of information gathered from Havenford and previous stops along the way. His notebook pages fluttered slightly in the breeze as he worked, his pen darting across the paper in sharp, decisive movements. Yet his pen tapped a frantic rhythm against the page, a clear sign of his frustration. Pieces were missing, and Ron detested an incomplete puzzle. "This is controlled," Ron said aloud, his voice breaking the rhythmic creaks of the carriage wheels. He tapped his pen against the page as if trying to will the answers to appear. Think about it, Marcus, the locations, the targets. It's too deliberate. You don't see malice spreading randomly like this. Marcus, sitting confidently in the driver's seat and commandeering the carriage, tilted his head slightly, glancing at Ron from the corner of his eye. Controlled? That's a bold claim, Ron. How do you figure? Ron pushed himself to sit beside Marcus, his flowchart held firmly in his hands. Look here, he said, pointing to Windmere on the map he'd sketched out. It started here. Windmere. This was the testing ground. That's clear. You can say they must have left it after gathering enough data, results from whatever operation or experiments they were running. And then, he dragged his finger across the page, highlighting 3 other locations. It spread to 3 places simultaneously. Marcus frowned slightly, his brow furrowing in confusion. Spread? What do you mean, spread? Ron gestured emphatically, his voice growing more animated. Yes. Think about the timing. The 3 locations struck at the same time. That means there must have been 3 individuals, acting in different places at once, spreading malice. Marcus raised an eyebrow, giving Ron a skeptical look. And how would they even spread malice? Through whispers? Touch? It defies logic. Ron leaned forward, his tone dropping slightly as he continued his explanation. Let's go back to Cain, remember? He said he met a man, the last man he saw before things went wrong. And then there's the survivor testimony from Havenford. Their host mentioned a stranger offering them pleasure, urging them to give in to pain, to revenge, to anger. All signs point to malice. Marcus nodded slowly, attempting to follow Ron's train of thought. Though the details were dense, he caught enough of the main points to understand the gravity of the situation. So, whoever, or whatever, these people are, they're spreading malice intentionally. Testing it, measuring it, expanding it. Exactly, Ron said, his frustration bubbling again. He couldn't quite pin down the final conclusion, the ultimate link that tied it all together. His voice softened slightly as he muttered, half to himself, it's deliberate. It's designed. But, why? And who? Marcus kept one hand steady on the reins, glancing briefly at Ron as he murmured. You'll figure it out, Ron. You always do. Ron sighed, flipping through his notes once more, his mind racing as he tried to connect the final dots. Despite his frustration, the pieces he'd uncovered so far pointed to something far greater than simple chaos. This wasn't just malice, it was control, precision, purpose. And Ron wasn't about to stop until he uncovered the truth. The duo pressed onward, the northern winds growing sharper with each passing mile. Though Marcus couldn't fully grasp the weight of Ron's deductions, he knew one thing for sure. Windmere wasn't just another stop. It was the next step in unraveling the dark design behind the Sorrowfiend's spread, and Ron's determination to solve it was stronger than ever. Windmere, a ghost town of ruin. The northern winds howled through the desolate streets of Windmere, carrying with them the echoes of a once thriving community. What had once been a peaceful haven for agricultural workers and fishermen was now a shadow of its former self, a ghost town, scarred by chaos and tragedy. The idyllic countryside retreat, where neighbors helped one another and life was simple, had been reduced to ruins. The remnants of Windmere's past were still visible, though they only served as haunting reminders of what had been lost. Broken fishing nets lay tangled on the shores, their owners long gone or unwilling to return. Fields that once bore crops now stood barren, the soil stained with blood and ash. Homes were shattered, their walls splintered and roofs caved in, as if the town itself had been torn apart by unseen hands. The survivors who remained clung to the ruins, refusing to leave despite the horrors that had unfolded. They wandered the streets like ghosts themselves, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion. Many stayed out of loyalty to their dead loved ones, unwilling to abandon the memories of those they had lost. Some tended to graves hastily dug in the town square, while others sat silently in the ruins of their homes, staring into the distance as if waiting for answers that would never come. Evidence of the Sorrowfiend's rampage was everywhere. Bloodstains marked the walls of homes, and the ground bore signs of struggle, deep gouges, shattered weapons, and scorch marks. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and the silence was broken only by the occasional, ragged cry of a survivor mourning their loss, a sound swallowed quickly by the vast emptiness. The town's once vibrant community had been replaced by an eerie stillness, punctuated by the whispers of the wind. For Ron and Marcus, the sight of Windmere was sobering. The idyllic countryside they had imagined was gone, replaced by a chilling reality. This was no longer a place of simple living, it was a graveyard of dreams, a testament to the devastation wrought by malice. And yet, the survivors' refusal to leave hinted at something deeper, a resilience, a determination to hold on to what little remained. As the duo stepped into the heart of Windmere, the weight of their mission pressed heavily upon them. The Sorrow Fiends had left their mark here, and it was up to Ron and Marcus to uncover the truth behind the chaos. Whatever answers lay hidden in this ruined town, they knew they would have to face them head-on. The encounter with the boy as the carriage rolled into the ruined heart of Windmere, the eerie silence was broken by the sudden sound of rocks pelting against the side of the vehicle. A small figure emerged from behind the rubble, a boy, no older than 7, his face streaked with dirt and his eyes wide with fear and defiance. "Go away," the boy shouted, his voice trembling but determined. "I'm not coming with you. Leave me alone." He hurled another rock with all the strength his small arms could muster. Marcus, quick on his feet, expertly evaded the incoming projectiles, catching the ones that were about to hit Ron. The rocks clattered harmlessly to the ground, but Ron barely noticed. His gaze was fixed on the boy, a sharp pain lancing through his chest as he took in the child's ragged appearance and the desperation in his voice. The remnants of destruction around them, the shattered homes, the blood-stained earth, only deepened the weight in Ron's chest. "Poor child," Ron breathed, his voice heavy with sorrow. He stepped forward slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Hey, wait," he called out gently, his tone soft and reassuring. "We're just travelers. We're not here to hurt you." The boy's grip on another rock tightened, his small frame trembling as he prepared to throw it. "You're lying. You're here to take me away, like the others." Ron's heart clenched at the boy's words. The others? Ron's mind raced, a cold dread settling over him. What horrors had this child witnessed? It was clear the boy believed he was in danger. Ron's divinant instincts surged, urging him not just to gather information, but to console the boy, to ease the profound fear in his eyes. He crouched slightly, lowering himself to the boy's level. "I promise, we're not here to take you anywhere," Ron said, his voice steady and kind. "We're just passing through. I just want to talk. That's all." Marcus, standing nearby, kept a watchful eye on the boy, ready to intervene if necessary. But he could see the genuine concern in Ron's expression, the way he was trying to reach the child's heart. Marcus stayed silent, letting Ron take the lead. The boy hesitated, his grip on the rock loosening slightly. His wide eyes darted between Ron and Marcus, searching for any sign of deception. Ron took a small step closer, his movements slow and deliberate. "What's your name?" he asked softly, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed to cut through the boy's fear. "I'm Ron, and this is Marcus. We're just travelers, I swear." The boy didn't answer immediately, but the tension in his small frame began to ease. Ron could see the cracks in the boy's defenses, the way his fear was slowly giving way to curiosity, or perhaps hope. This child had seen too much, lost too much. Ron wasn't just trying to win his trust for answers, he genuinely wanted to help. "Please," Ron added, his voice almost a whisper. "We're not your enemies. We just want to understand what happened here." The boy's hand finally dropped to his side, the rock slipping from his fingers. He didn't speak, but the defiance in his eyes softened, replaced by something fragile and uncertain. Ron took a deep breath, knowing this was just the beginning of earning the boy's trust. Whatever the child had to say, it could hold the key to understanding the horrors that had befallen Windmere. But for now, Ron's priority was clear: comfort the boy, and let him know he wasn't alone. Ron's investigation deepens as the story unfolded. Windmere's chilling silence was interrupted by moments of humanity, resilience, and reflection. Ron and Marcus, now immersed in the aftermath of Sorrowfiend destruction, began to uncover details about the broken yet enduring community. Talia's story: when the young boy fled toward the ruins of his home, Ron's pursuit was interrupted by the firm voice of a woman. "Hey you," she called, her voice sharp as splintered bone, but with a tremor of anxiety beneath it. Standing in the midst of the rubble, Talia, a woman in her late 20s, demanded answers. "What do you want from the boy? I saw you chasing him. Are you one of those luminaries? Or from Havenford?" Ron, understanding her apprehension, raised his hands slightly in a gesture of peace. "Neither," he said calmly. "I'm Ron. We're here investigating what happened." Without hesitation, he showed her the crest from the warrior faction, knowing transparency would win her trust better than evasiveness. Talia studied him for a moment before her guarded expression softened. "Come with me," she said, her voice more subdued now. She led Ron toward a small clearing in the ruins, where graves had been dug, graves belonging to her parents and countless others. From afar, Marcus saw Ron gesture for him to follow, and he nodded, staying with the carriage to prepare for potential dangers while keeping Baron and Grandy secure. As they reached the graves, Talia introduced herself, sharing that she regularly visited Windmere to honor her parents and reflect on the horrors that had unfolded. She began to recount the events with a trembling voice, her anguish and grief spilling over as Ron listened with unwavering attention. Flashbacks of despair. Talia described the night when the sorrow fiends struck Windmere, her words vivid and haunting. "I saw them chasing my parents," she said, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down her face as she recalled the chaos, screams everywhere, the terror in the eyes of children and elders alike. "No," she whispered, as if reliving the moment. The screeching sound of those monsters, the way they tore through everything, it was unbearable. She described the streets filled with running figures, the cries of "run" echoing through the town. The fiends had brought with them an aura of destruction that felt almost unnatural, as though it was driven by something far deeper than mere malice. But then her voice lowered, and her expression turned even darker. "They didn't come from the forest or outside the town," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They came from inside Windmere. It started here, in the heart of the city. I don't know how or why, but the monsters, they were among us before we even knew what was happening. It was like they emerged from nowhere, spreading chaos before anyone could react." Ron's eyes narrowed as he absorbed her words. The fiends starting within the city? That single detail shifted his understanding of the Sorrow Fiend's behavior. This wasn't an external attack, it was an infiltration, a carefully orchestrated spread from the inside out. "I saw my mom and dad die," Talia continued, her voice trembling. "They tried to fight back, but those monsters were too strong. Everywhere I turned, people were dying." Ron didn't interrupt. He sat quietly, his calm presence allowing Talia to share her pain. Marcus, nearby, kept a cautious watch while attending to the horses, making sure their surroundings were secure. When Talia's voice finally faded, replaced by soft sobs, Ron gently handed her a cup of tea prepared by Marcus. The tea, made from ember blossom, a mystical plant known for its calming properties, had been carried by Ron since leaving his hometown, a testament to its effectiveness among warriors. "This should help," Ron said, his tone warm yet composed. Talia took the tea hesitantly, her tears slowing as she sipped. The warmth seemed to ease her trembling, and after a few moments, Ron carefully timed his next words. A seasoned interrogator, Ron leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle but focused. "Talia, I'm sorry to trouble you further, but I need to ask about the Sorrow Fiends. You said they started inside the city. Did you notice anything unusual before the attacks? Were there signs, anything that seemed out of place?" Talia wiped her tears, her gaze lowering as she thought. "It wasn't obvious at first," she said softly. "But some of the townsfolk started acting strange. They were angry, restless, like they weren't themselves. And then, the attacks started. It all happened so fast." Ron nodded slowly, the gears in his mind turning as he processed the information. Ron seamlessly wove questions into shared anecdotes about himself, his mission, and even Marcus. It was a calculated dance of transparency, subtly building trust and easing Talia's anxiety. Marcus, watching from afar, couldn't help but marvel at Ron's ability to balance empathy with precision. This was a side of Ron he rarely saw, calculated, patient, and genuinely concerned. Finally, Ron asked his last question. "I don't want to trouble you further, but could you tell me about the boy we met earlier?" "Everin, I believe his name is?" "Everin and Lady Doriel." "Ah," Talia said, her voice steadier now. "That's Everin, pronounced Evren. He and the other kids stayed here because they don't want to leave their loved ones. They're being cared for by Lady Doriel, pronounced Do-Riel, an herbalist whose husband died during the attacks. He was a baker. Doriel still bakes for the kids, and they help her with errands. It's the only thing holding them together." Ron frowned slightly. Everin mentioned the luminaries in Havenford. What did he mean? Talia nodded. After the aftermath, nomad healers and luminaries came to help, healing the wounded, giving food. They took some of the children to their churches, helping them find new families or placing them in orphanages. The people of Havenford came too, offering to care for the kids and bring them to their town. But the ones left here didn't want to go. They chose to stay. Ron exhaled deeply, understanding the boy's earlier reaction. Of course, Everin was afraid. He had witnessed strangers arriving in Windmere after the tragedy, taking children away, even if it was for good intentions. It made sense now. Moving forward, the heart of Windmere with Talia's testimony weighing heavily on him, Ron knew his next step was clear. The information about the Sorrow Fiend's origin within the city, combined with the presence of Everin and the other children under Lady Doriel's care, painted a complex picture of devastation and defiant hope. It was time to approach Lady Doriel, not just for more answers about the attacks, but to understand the resilience of this shattered community. He glanced at Marcus, a silent understanding passing between them. The true heart of Windmere's tragedy, and perhaps its survival, lay within the ruins of its homes, under the care of those who refused to abandon it. Ron knew his mission here had just truly begun. Audio note. End of chapter 15. Next chapter coming up next. Audio note. Start of chapter 16. Ron and Marcus. A duo's dedication. Ron offered Talia his help, but she gently declined, assuring him she was fine. With a respectful nod, Ron bid her farewell, thanking her for her time. He then turned to Marcus, giving clear instructions. Go to Lady Doriel's residence. Offer her help if she needs it. She's important to the children here. Marcus, ever reliable, agreed without hesitation. As Ron continued to interview other survivors, his usual sharp-edged humor was absent, replaced by a quiet remorse and unwavering determination. From a distance, Marcus observed Ron, admiring how carefully he navigated the delicate emotions of Windmere's survivors. Marcus's tale. Hope for the children later. At the cliff's edge, Ron glanced at Marcus. What did you do there with the children? Marcus leaned against the carriage, a small smile playing on his lips as he began to narrate his time with the kids. The children were wary at first, he said, his voice calm yet warm. But when I told them we were investigating and mentioned the warrior faction, their eyes lit up. Especially Everin, he seemed fascinated. He wished to become a warrior too. Marcus paused, his expression softening as he recalled the child's excitement. To lift their spirits, I decided to tell them stories from our adventures, Marcus continued. Only the kid-friendly ones, of course. I may have exaggerated a little, he admitted with a sheepish grin. I made you the hero of the tales, Ron. Ron chuckled, shaking his head. Of course you did. Marcus laughed softly before continuing. The kids were captivated. They cheered, they laughed, and they started looking up to you as a hero. Everin especially. So I gave him something, a little crest I made with my own hands. Nothing fancy, just a token of encouragement. I told him, if you want to be trained as a warrior, come to our land and show them this crest. Speak the name of hero Ron and his sidekick Marcus, and tell them we invited you to join. Ask for me specially. His face lit up like the stars above. Ron listened intently, a faint smile playing on his lips. Marcus continued, his tone steady. After that, I helped with the heavier tasks around the house, things only I could manage. Lady Doriel didn't ask much, but she was kind enough to express her gratitude. She said my presence gave the children hope, even just for today. Ron's reflection. A bond forged in justice. Ron's chest swelled with pride as Marcus narrated the story. He glanced at Marcus with a thoughtful expression before speaking. You did great, Marcus. You've given those kids hope, and that's no small thing. Marcus shrugged modestly. Well, the stories I told them were about you being the hero, so they all look up to you now. Ron laughed, a light and genuine sound. Well, Marcus, let's not disappoint them, he said with conviction. For a moment, Ron reminisced, his thoughts drifting back to the time Marcus had come to his rescue when he was being bullied. That memory brought a grin to his face, and he chuckled again as he turned to his trusted friend. You truly are a man of justice, Marcus. Someone who cares deeply for people. I'm glad you're by my side. Marcus smirked slightly, looking out at the sea. And I'm glad I'm here, Ron. We make a pretty good team, don't we? Ron nodded, the wind whipping around them as the waves crashed against the rocks below. This was one of those moments that reminded him of the strength of their bond. They weren't just companions on a mission, they were the best of friends. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, driven not just by duty, but by the shared determination to bring light and hope to those who had lost it. The night of revelation, unraveling the truth as night deepened in the abandoned house they had taken refuge in. The wind howled outside, rattling loose boards and broken windows. Inside, Ron was back to his usual self, pacing and murmuring, piecing together the fragments of information he had painstakingly gathered. Marcus, seated nearby, kept a watchful eye on him while attending to his own tasks, accustomed to Ron's trance-like deductive states. Ron paused in front of a dusty old shelf, his sharp eyes catching the glint of something faintly reflective. Stepping closer, he brushed away the dirt and debris to reveal a religious artifact, its surface engraved with the unmistakable symbol of the sun. He stared at it, his mind racing. "Sun. The light," Ron murmured, the words slipping out almost unconsciously. Then his thoughts shifted sharply, connecting to something buried deep in his memories. Malice. And the luminaries. He remembered his father's words, spoken long ago. The luminaries once destroyed old records of the ancients, the gods, and anything that didn't serve their agenda. They burn what they can't control. It was as if a spark ignited in Ron's mind. He froze, his breathing quickening as pieces began to fall into place. The sorrow fiends starting inside Windmere, the rumors of suppressed knowledge, the tragic timing of the luminaries' presence after every calamity. It all seemed too coincidental to ignore. Then, as if struck by lightning, Ron shouted, "Luminaries." A heated revelation, connecting the dots. Marcus, startled from his quiet tasks, turned to Ron with wide eyes. "Luminaries? What?" Ron spun around, his eyes alight with intensity. "Marcus, don't you see? Everything, it's all connected. The sorrow fiends, the destruction, the tragedies, they're always there, always involved." Marcus raised a skeptical eyebrow but didn't interrupt as Ron began pacing again, his words tumbling out in a flood of logic and conviction. "It's their history," Ron said, his voice gaining momentum. "My father told me, they've destroyed ancient records. Entire archives burned because they didn't fit the luminaries' narrative. Why? To control knowledge. To shape their ideals as the only truth worth worshipping." Marcus crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful but cautious. "Ron, isn't that just what they do? They're healers, messengers of the light. The nomad healers help in the same way: food, care, shelter. You can't ignore the good they do." "Yes, they help," Ron admitted, his tone sharpening. "But think about it. Every time tragedy strikes, they're there. And yes, the nomad healers also help, but the nomads don't destroy knowledge. They don't burn records to fit their agenda. The luminaries do. And look at this." He gestured toward the sun artifact, holding it up as though it was the missing piece. "A symbol of their light, found right in the heart of this chaos." Marcus frowned slightly, trying to keep up with Ron's leaps in logic. "And you think they have something to do with the sorrow fiends?" Ron nodded, his intensity unwavering. "Yes, or at least they benefit from the tragedies. Think about it, Marcus. Who gains the most from all of this? Every disaster, every town devastated, they're there, offering salvation, gathering followers. They're not just healers, they're consolidators of power." He pointed at his hastily drawn notes spread out on the table, linking ideas and evidence with lines and annotations. "Who benefits when knowledge of the past is erased, when people are desperate and willing to follow any beacon of hope? The luminaries. They gain more followers, more influence." Marcus rubbed his chin, his skepticism giving way to cautious consideration. He couldn't deny that Ron's deductions, while ambitious, were compelling. "You might have a point," Marcus said finally, "but it's still a lot to take in." Ron smirked, his usual confidence returning. "That's why I have you. To keep me grounded while I dive headfirst into madness." Marcus chuckled despite himself. "Well, someone has to. Just don't start screaming luminaries in public. I don't think they'd take kindly to your theories." Ron laughed, a genuine, warm sound. "Don't worry, Marcus. For now, I'll keep it between us. But this could be bigger than anything we've uncovered so far." The night continued, the two friends debating, theorizing, and piecing together the puzzle. The weight of Ron's deductions hung heavily in the room, but so did a sense of purpose. Whatever the truth behind the sorrow fiends and the luminaries, the duo knew they were one step closer to uncovering it, and they would face whatever came next together, their friendship stronger than ever. A morning of decisions and interruptions. The early morning light bathed the ruins of Windmere in a faint golden glow, though it did little to soften the grim reality of the town's devastation. Ron and Marcus, preparing to depart, busied themselves loading their belongings into the carriage. Ron, carrying a heavy crate alongside Marcus, seemed lost in thought. His mind churned through the details of his investigation, revisiting the evidence gathered from survivors and his theories about the luminaries. His conclusion, while intriguing, wasn't certain. "It's not enough proof," Ron murmured to himself as he placed the crate in the carriage. He had included the luminaries among the list of possible suspects, but their involvement wasn't concrete. "For now, we'll follow the trail from the evidence and the information we have," he said aloud, voicing his thoughts. His eyes flicked briefly to Marcus, who was securing the carriage with expert precision. Ron trusted Marcus implicitly. He knew that Marcus, as always, had already sent their report back to the Rugal estate, pronounced Rugal, ensuring their findings and theories were safely recorded. It gave Ron some comfort, knowing their work was being tracked back home. But with Windmere's ruins behind them, where would they go next? "Maybe we should go back to Havenford," Ron suggested, his tone contemplative. He glanced at Marcus for confirmation. Marcus looked up, nodding. "Sure. Now?" The messenger's urgency. A new lead just as Ron and Marcus prepared to leave. The sound of hooves thundering against the rocky path caught their attention. The pair turned, their hands instinctively falling to their weapons, though they relaxed slightly at the sight of horse riders approaching with haste. The riders, clad in simple but sturdy travel gear, shouted as they drew near. Sir Ron, the lead rider called out, his voice urgent. "We are from Havenford. We bring news from the Elder." Ron and Marcus exchanged quick glances before Ron stepped forward. The rider dismounted swiftly, pulling a parchment from his satchel. He handed it to Ron with an air of importance, his expression serious. "One of the witnesses we encountered recently has come forward with new revelations. The Elder instructed me to find you immediately and deliver this. He said you would understand its significance." Ron took the parchment, his curiosity piqued, and unfurled it carefully. Marcus, standing nearby, kept his eyes on the riders, ensuring no threats lingered. The parchment bore the insignia of Havenford's Elder Eldrick Vaughn, pronounced Vaughn, and the message within began to reveal itself. The message unfolds. Malric Veilshade. The duo paused, the wind carrying the whispers of waves in the distance, as Ron's eyes scanned the first few words of the Elder's cryptic message. The rider stood silently, awaiting further instruction, as the weight of the revelation lingered in the air. "Dear Sir Ron, I trust this letter finds you in good health. The other day, the witness Lola Matter awakened after what we now understand was a possession. She has provided a new testimony, recounting what she experienced during that time. Remarkably, Lola appeared to be fully aware of her ordeal while possessed. During her struggle, her latent divinity worked to suppress and resist the malignant influence of the Sorrow Fiend, a feat that likely saved her. Please keep the contents of this letter strictly confidential. The messenger I've sent to you is trustworthy and bound by loyalty to me. You have my word that he has not, and will not, read its contents. For now, let this information remain between us until we can verify its full extent. Lola Matter, as we discovered, is an elementalist and a latent divinant whose powers only recently awakened. This may explain why she successfully managed to regain control of her own body. Among the details she shared, she provided a description of a specific person, captured through elemental projection, with the aid of a local elementalist divinant who assisted her in creating an image of the individual responsible for implanting the malice into her. To pursue this lead further, I sought the assistance of our mutual acquaintance, the broker. I paid a significant price for his services and obtained results, though the information provided is limited to what I could afford. Nevertheless, we were able to trace the origins of the individual in question. The name we received is Malric Veilshade, pronounced Malric Veilshade. Please reflect on this information and consider whether it aligns with anything you've uncovered in your own investigation. I trust your insight and thoroughness to unravel the implications of this revelation. Yours in trust, Elder Eldrick Vaughn. Decisions and Uncertainty. A new path. Ron stood tall as the messenger finished his task, bowing slightly before burning the letter on the Elder's orders. The flames flickered briefly before consuming the parchment entirely. The rider then spoke, his tone firm yet courteous. "We will return now, Sir Ron. Our errands end here." Ron nodded, his expression steady. "Thank you, Please extend my gratitude to Elder Eldrick Vaughn. As the riders mounted their horses and disappeared into the horizon, Ron took a moment of quiet reflection. In his heart, he felt immense gratitude for the Elder's efforts. Turning to Marcus, who was busy fastening their belongings onto the carriage, Ron spoke with renewed determination. "We have a new lead," he said, the weight of the information evident in his tone. "I trust that this requires verification. Malric Veilshade, that's the name we've been given. But where do we go from here?" He paused for a moment before adding, "Quick, send a message back to the Rugal estate. Let them search the archives for any clues about Malric. My father, Eric, has access to them, and this couldn't come at a better time. He's already on his way to meet with the Blade Lords and the Sword King. If he finds nothing himself, he can raise the issue directly with them during the meeting." Marcus nodded, placing a hand on the carriage as he processed Ron's words. "All right, I'll send the message. But you know it'll take days before we hear back from them, right?" "Right," Ron replied, rubbing the back of his neck as frustration crept in. "That's the problem. We're back to square one. Malric Veilshade is a great lead, but we can't let ourselves get stuck waiting on answers. We need to keep moving. The bigger picture, relentless pursuit." As Ron considered their next steps, the importance of his father's role in this investigation grew clearer in his mind. Eric wasn't just a warrior. He was a trusted figure with deep connections to the Blade Lords and, by extension, the Sword King himself. If anyone could bring the name Malric Veilshade to the forefront of higher councils and investigative forces, it was his father. Even with this reassurance, Ron's unease lingered. Despite the lead being valuable, it still felt like chasing shadows. "Marcus," Ron said, breaking the quiet, "we'll follow what we have, but we can't just rely on this one clue. It's a start, yes, but we need to keep our momentum." Marcus, as steady and practical as ever, nodded. "Then we keep going, no matter where the trail leads." Audio note. End of chapter 16. Next chapter coming up next. Audio note. Start of chapter 17. The Bastion of Blades, a fortress forged in glory perched on a towering blackstone cliff overlooking the vast plains. The Bastion of Blades stands as the formidable heart of the warrior faction. More than just a fortress, it embodies martial prowess and honors the legacy of both warriors and divinants. Its silhouette, imposing and awe-inspiring, seems as eternal as the mountains themselves, a testament to unyielding strength and authority. The Bastion is no mere palace, it's a sanctuary of discipline, a crucible welcoming only the most capable warriors. Its design, a fusion of ancient craftsmanship and mystical ingenuity, mirrors the warrior faction's ideals: simplicity in form, perfection in execution, and raw, unyielding might. Colossal walls of unbreakable stone pierce the heavens, embedded with veins of gleaming orichalcum, pronounced, or ihchalcum, that shimmer faintly, evidence of the divinants who imbued the structure with their very essence. At the central spire lies the Hall of Accord, a circular chamber where the warrior faction's leaders, the Blade Lords, legendary masters of combat, and their sovereign, the Sword King, convene. The chamber's soaring ceiling reveals an intricate fresco depicting the eternal cycle of battle, training, forging, victory, and sacrifice. Ethereal beams of light stream through skylights, reflecting off the polished floor, which is intricately engraved with the Sword King's sigil. The Bastion's purpose: a crucible of greatness. The Bastion of Blades transcends a mere seat of power. It serves as a testing ground for greatness. Its expansive grounds host arenas, sparring fields, and training halls where divinants and aspirants relentlessly hone their skills. Within these hallowed walls, divinants, elite warriors blessed with rare traits, tirelessly refine techniques that could dramatically alter the course of battle. These techniques are rigorously scrutinized, developed, and perfected before being meticulously recorded in the Codex of Steel, a living archive of the warrior faction's martial history. Once approved by the Sword King himself, these perfected techniques are disseminated throughout the faction, passed to its leaders, and ultimately shared with the people under their domains. This ensures the entire faction benefits from continuous advancements in martial tactics and combat philosophy, a constant evolution that solidifies their dominance. The Bastion's outer grounds, known as the Spires of Temperance, serve as the ultimate proving ground. Only those deemed worthy, warriors who have demonstrated their mettle in both body and spirit, are permitted to pass through its gates. To set foot inside is to earn the profound respect of the warrior faction. To walk its halls is to stand among the mightiest. Lord Eric's arrival. A looming shadow as Lord Eric strode toward the Hall of Accord, his trusted counselor relayed the urgent details of Ron's message, the name Malric Veilshade, pronounced Malric Veilshade, and the troubling revelations from Havenford. The timing felt fortuitous. Eric knew this name held significant importance, and the immediate access to the Blade Lords and the Sword King could provide critical clarity and direction for their efforts. Moving with a commanding presence through the bastion's polished corridors, Eric's resolve, tempered by years of leadership and combat, was evident. This was no ordinary meeting. The Blade Lords were not just warriors, they were paragons, each embodying a distinct combat philosophy. Presenting Ron's findings to them was a weighty decision, yet Eric trusted this council, alongside the Sword King, to guide them toward the truth. As he approached the Hall of Accord's great iron doors, they opened with a resonant clang, revealing the chamber's grandeur. The Blade Lords were already seated, their expressions stoic and attentive. At the far end of the room, upon the throne of blades, sat the Sword King himself, a figure whose very presence radiated unshakable strength. With measured steps, Eric entered, ready to share the revelations his son had unearthed and to seek wisdom from the greatest minds and fighters the warrior faction had ever known. The Blade Lords, guardians of humanity's hope. The Blade Lords, 5 elite warriors, pinnacles of martial prowess and strategic brilliance, had convened once more in the hallowed Hall of Accord within the Bastion of Blades. This was no ordinary or ceremonial gathering, it was an assembly of profound importance, carrying implications not only for the warrior faction but potentially for all of humanity. Within the warrior faction, the Blade Lords symbolized the ultimate synthesis of strength, wisdom, and discipline. They were entrusted with shaping combat and defense, ensuring humanity's warriors remained prepared for any threat, no matter how dire. Yet, this gathering carried an urgency rarely seen even in this esteemed chamber. Whatever was about to be discussed had the potential to ripple far beyond their faction, impacting the lives of all who sought peace, freedom, and survival. The Blade Lords roster. Lord Eric Rugal, twin swords of precision and balance. The first to enter was Lord Eric Rugal, pronounced Rugal, the embodiment of precision and balance. His mastery of the twin swords made him a versatile and calculated force in battle, where each strike and parry flowed seamlessly. As both a Blade Lord and a strategist, his discipline and calm leadership earned him widespread respect. Known for his ability to inspire warriors of all kinds, Eric's presence brought stability to a council that often grappled with unpredictable challenges. Lady Kaylee's Dracor, blazing spear of tactical flame. Next came Lady Kaylee's Dracor, pronounced Kaylee Dracor, her presence burning as brightly as the spear she carried. The air around her seemed to shimmer, her divinity manifesting in a blaze of tactical brilliance. Kaylee's was not merely a master of the spear but of strategy itself. Every battle she fought was a meticulously orchestrated dance of calculated moves. Her fiery aura symbolized both destruction and renewal, a force as fierce as it was purposeful. Her assistant, a divinant whose blazing armor radiated light, mirrored her master's intensity, standing tall and ready. Lord Baron Stoneheart, unyielding shield of the immovable wall. The ground seemed to subtly shift as Lord Baron Stoneheart entered the hall. Known as the Defender of Realms, his shield was a fortress unto itself, unyielding and indestructible. Baron's sheer resilience had forged his reputation. He stood unbroken against countless sieges, his divine aura a bulwark against chaos. His presence was imposing, his armor designed to withstand the greatest forces, and the divinant by his side carried an air of unshakable loyalty and strength. Together, they embodied the defensive power that had saved countless lives. Lady Solara Nightsong, shadow daggers of the silent blade. From the deepest shadows emerged Lady Solara Nightsong, pronounced Se-La Ra, her movements so quiet that her arrival was barely noticed until she stood at the chamber's center. Her daggers gleamed with faint light, symbols of her deadly precision and unparalleled stealth. Solara was the specter of the Blade Lords, a cunning figure who struck without warning, leaving chaos in her wake. Her unique divinity manifested in the shadows she commanded, a living darkness that danced at her will. Her assistant divinant followed closely, movements equally silent, a shadow within a shadow. Lord Garen Thorn, thunder axe of the storm's power. Finally, the hall trembled as Lord Garen Thorn strode in, his mere presence sending a ripple through the room. Garen was raw power incarnate, a disciple of the Sword King and the strongest of the Blade Lords. His axe, crackling with divine energy, hummed with the fury of a storm contained within its edges. Garen's movements were deliberate, his aura overwhelming, a reminder of the unmatched strength he carried. His assistant Divinant stood tall beside him, radiating strength akin to Garen's own, a perfect complement to the might of the Thunder Axe. Together, they embodied destruction and dominance, a force few dared challenge. As the 5 Blade Lords gathered, the tension in the Hall of Accord was palpable. Their presence marked the convergence of humanity's greatest warriors, each representing a distinct philosophy and strength. The Sword King, seated on the throne of blades, observed them quietly, knowing that the decisions made in this chamber could shape the fate of the world. The Blade Lords' conversations, a glimpse of humanity as the 5 Blade Lords convened in the Hall of Accord, the air, heavy with the weight of their roles, was softened by the camaraderie natural to these seasoned warriors. Though their meeting carried profound implications for humanity's survival and future, their discussions began on a more personal note. Waiting for the Sword King, they allowed themselves a rare moment of ease, exchanging updates on their respective domains and lives. Lord Eric Rugal spoke first, his calm voice cutting through the silence. "The military forces in my region hold steady," he began, his tone as measured as his twin swords. "And we've identified several young warriors with potential. One, in particular, shows exceptional promise." A faint smile touched his lips. "They remind me of my son, Ron, though I wonder if the boy's recklessness might run in the bloodline." This earned soft chuckles from the others. Lady Kaylee's Dracor leaned forward slightly, the fire in her aura reflected in her words. "That's good to hear, Eric," she said, "because in my lands, I've been working on a new technique with my spear. I've refined it so the projections burn hotter and faster. But," she added with a sly grin, "I'll not share the specifics unless you agree to spar with me, Eric. I'd love to see if your balance can handle my blaze." The room echoed with light laughter at her challenge. "New techniques, eh?" rumbled Lord Baron Stoneheart, his deep voice as unyielding as the shield he bore. "I've been working on something myself. It's less flashy, just a way to deflect consecutive heavy strikes without breaking formation. I doubt it'd impress you, Kaylees, but it's saved many lives already." His tone softened as he added, "And speaking of lives saved, my son's taken to accompanying me in training the recruits. His shield work, well, let's just say he's inherited his father's patience." From the shadows, Lady Solara Nightsong interjected, her voice as quiet as her deadly movements. "Patience? That's something my recruits lack," she murmured with a wry smile. "Perhaps I'll send them to you for discipline, Baron. As for me, I've spent more time on the move than at my base. And, on a more personal note, my daughter insists on crafting her own daggers now. She says mine lack flair." Imagine that. The hall erupted in muted laughter at her rare, dry humor. It was a reminder of her dual nature, a figure of darkness and mystery, yet very much human. Lastly, Lord Garen Thorne, towering and crackling with energy, leaned back with a booming laugh. "You all talk about refinement and patience, but sometimes raw power is the answer. In my domain, I've been demonstrating the Thunder Call to the younger warriors. Nothing humbles an overconfident recruit like facing the edge of a storm. And my son," he paused, shaking his head fondly. "The boy is already swinging a hammer nearly as big as mine. I pity the sparring partners I assign him." As the conversations drifted between updates, techniques, and cherished family moments, it became clear that though they were legends, the Blade Lords were bound by humanity as much as duty. These moments of sharing, of levity, were rare and necessary, grounding them in a world they sought to protect. However, the undercurrent of urgency was never far. Each had faced common threads of disturbances across their lands. Whispers of sorrow fiends, shadows spreading unseen. As they exchanged glances, the tone shifted slowly, and they began speculating, preparing for the arrival of their Sword King, the one whose judgment would align their disparate insights into a unified purpose. The gathering at the Bastion of Blades, ritual and reverence. The meeting at the Bastion of Blades began with its customary ceremony, steeped in the traditions that bound the warrior faction. A row of attendants stepped forward, their arms laden with carefully crafted tokens, artifacts, and scrolls. These were the codices of innovation, documents chronicling newly developed techniques and refined martial strategies. Each item had been rigorously tested and perfected within the Citadel's hallowed halls. The Sword King himself had approved them, and as a gesture of unity, they were offered freely to the Blade Lords to take back to their respective domains, a gift of knowledge and skill to elevate their warriors. As the attendants moved gracefully between the Blade Lords, offering the fruits of the Citadel's labor, the air was alive with anticipation. Following this, in a gesture of camaraderie and respect, the Blade Lords exchanged personal gifts, another long-standing tradition. Each member had brought something significant, symbolic tokens, artifacts, or rare items unique to their lands. It was not the lords themselves who took these gifts, but their assistants, who received them on behalf of their masters, ensuring the Blade Lords remained focused on their roles in the gathering. The Sword King's assessment. Wisdom from the throne. After the ceremonial exchanges, the room grew still as the Sword King rose to his feet. His presence commanded attention, and all eyes turned to him as he stepped forward. This was the moment the Blade Lords awaited with both eagerness and reverence. The Sword King's assessment, a deeply personal and profound moment, began. One by one, the Sword King moved to each of the 5 Blade Lords, his gaze piercing, his aura suffocating yet exhilarating. He examined the aura each lord exuded, his sharp intuition sensing not only their power but their growth, struggles, and potential. For each, he offered pointers and insights, an honor unparalleled among warriors. His words were precise and profound, delivered with the weight of one who had transcended mortal understanding. Elarith Rugel's balance was lauded, but the Sword King challenged him to harness his precision to guide his blade with purpose beyond mere battle. Kaylee's Dracor's tactical flame burned bright, yet the Sword King reminded her to temper her fire, for unchecked chaos could harm her own forces. To Baron Stoneheart, he remarked upon the unyielding strength of his shield but encouraged him to adapt fluidity into his defenses. Solara Nightsong's stealth and precision were celebrated, but the Sword King emphasized that even shadows must sometimes step into the light to lead. Lastly, to his disciple, Lord Garen Thorn of the Thunder Axe, the Sword King simply smiled, a rare gesture of pride, and offered no critique, only silence, a mark of his profound satisfaction. The representative's address. Official matters. Once the personal evaluations were complete, the Sword King returned to the throne of blades and gestured to his representative to take the floor. The representative's role was to oversee the next phase of the meeting, official business updates. This was where matters beyond individual combat prowess were discussed, updates on the state of each domain, alliances, and preparations. The Sword King listened in silence as the representative outlined the agenda. While discussions ensued among the Blade Lords, they adhered strictly to the topics designated, ensuring focus and direction. Occasionally, the Sword King would interrupt to clarify a point or guide the conversation, his deep voice carrying the weight of finality. Lord Elarith Rugel, sitting patiently, awaited his moment to share the critical news about Malric Veilshade. The information was vital, and he knew the right opportunity would arise. But before he could speak, the Sword King himself broke the flow of discussion, his voice commanding and unmistakable. The Sword King speaks. The ominous Malice Bloom, the Sword King declared, his words rolling like thunder through the chamber. The air grew heavy as every Blade Lord fell silent. The Sword King's gaze swept across the room, his tone grave. I have spoken with the leaders of the other factions. All are alarmed by the signs. The luminaries remain incooperative, defiant in their refusal to mingle with others. Yet, even their arrogance cannot mask their submission to me, though they wear it as a facade. The Sword King paused, his brow furrowing in thought. I have faced chaos. The balance has shifted. The cycle will soon continue. His words carried an ominous weight, as though he alone had glimpsed the threads of fate. We gather here to arrange our battle plan. The Weaver of Faith, whose visions I trust above all others, has confirmed it. An ancient pattern begins to reassert itself. Set aside your other concerns. Leave them to those under your command. Our purpose now is clear. We prepare for war. His voice dipped lower, almost solemn, as he continued. The bloom will appear when the moon aligns with the shadow, and with its arrival, the world will tremble. For what is a bloom but an offering of beauty, masking a storm of death? Like petals unraveling in the dark, so too shall malice spread. A hush fell over the hall. The Sword King's poetic imagery lingered in the minds of the Blade Lords, each understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. There was no greater summons than this, a call to prepare for the coming storm. A transition of deference. Eric's silent struggle, the tension within the Hall of Accord was palpable. Lord Eric Rugal stood among the assembly, silent yet consumed by a storm of thoughts. The Sword King's decree had been clear. All efforts must focus on the Malice Bloom. To approach the Blade Lords for aid on another matter now would be tantamount to defiance. Yet the issue of Malric Veilshade gnawed at him, an ever-present shadow, a force growing in menace, a danger that could not be ignored. Eric clenched the hilts of his twin swords as his thoughts turned to his son, Ron. He had promised to keep him safe, to guide him as any father would. But the Sword King's command left little room for personal obligations, and the specter of disappointment loomed. Still, he refused to act impulsively. The meeting would soon end, and he resolved to consult Lord Adramoni, pronounced Ad-re-mo-ne, the Sword King's right hand, with the matter. Perhaps Adramoni could navigate the Sword King's decree and offer the support Eric so desperately needed. But what if Adramoni declined? What if the Sword King's edict extended even to him? Eric's jaw tightened as the unspoken conclusion formed. If all else failed, he would have to let his son handle the task himself. It was a thought that pained him deeply, yet it carried a faint flicker of hope. His son was capable, driven, and wise beyond his years. Perhaps this would be his test, a crucible to prove his mettle in the face of rising darkness. For now, Eric remained silent, his inner turmoil hidden beneath a composed facade. As the assembly continued, the ominous name Malric Veilshade loomed larger in his thoughts, a shadow against the light of the Bloom's immediate priority. The protocol for war preparations, a unified front with the Sword King's commands established, the meeting transitioned into familiar yet crucial procedures. Each Blade Lord was to return to their domain, relay updates to their councils, and ensure their lands were prepared for the battles to come. Reports would be sent, strategies discussed, and forces readied for deployment. The next stage, a grand strategy meeting, would unite not only the Blade Lords and their assistants but also their most trusted generals and advisors. Held within the sprawling Great Hall of Accord, this meeting would serve as a war council of unprecedented scale. Representatives from willing allies and even the luminaries, despite their reluctance, would attend, knowing the stakes were too high for isolation. The reluctant luminaries, saviors by necessity, the luminaries, though uncooperative and often distant from the other factions, could not ignore the looming threat of the Malice Bloom. For centuries, they had sought to erase the Bloom's history, but its inevitable return forced them to issue warnings to humanity. Reluctantly, they joined the war effort, not out of solidarity, but to maintain their reputation as the self-proclaimed saviors of humanity. To them, the prominence of the warrior faction was an irritant, and they feared the loss of glory should they fail to act. It was expected they would show face at the strategy meeting, their participation largely performative. However, under the Sword King's overwhelming influence, they had no room for defiance. Even their veiled arrogance could not withstand the unifying force of the Sword King. His presence silenced dissent, ensuring no petty rivalries or differences would disrupt the formation of a unified war strategy. The Grand Strategy Meeting. Humanity's Crossroads. The Grand Strategy Meeting was an effort of monumental proportions. Updates on military strength, the global distribution of forces, and the allocation of resources were meticulously deliberated. Warriors, divinants, and allies were mobilized for the front lines, strategic outposts, and critical defensive zones. This time, the stakes could not be higher. It was deemed the most important meeting of the era. Months, or even weeks, of preparation would follow, depending on the council's outcomes. But this time, something unique lingered in the air, a sense of urgency that surpassed any conflict before. The Malice Bloom, a harbinger of chaos, had made its presence undeniably known. Even the luminaries, so eager to erase its existence from history, could not deny its imminent arrival. The Sword King's voice, calm and commanding, carried across the chamber once more. We prepare for war. The bloom will come when the moon aligns with the shadow. And with its petals unfolding, humanity will stand at a crossroads. For even the most beautiful of blooms, born of darkness, carries seeds of destruction within. The poetic weight of his words settled over the room like a solemn vow. This wasn't just a war, it was a battle for balance, for the cycle of life itself. Under the Sword King's guidance, humanity would rise to meet this challenge, united as never before. Audio note. End of chapter 17. Next chapter coming up next. Audio note. Start of Chapter 18. A Messenger's Arrival. Marcus and Ron's moment interrupted within the courtyard of the Familia Rugal, pronounced Rugal, estate. The steady clang of steel echoed as Marcus repeated his swordsmanship drills. His brow furrowed with focus, his technique sharpening with each repetition. Across the stone path, Ron, fresh from the shower and still drying his hair, grinned mischievously. "Woo-hoo! Working hard there, mate. Must have done that 1,000 times today," he quipped. Marcus paused briefly, his tone cutting but not unkind. "Not all of us are geniuses like you, Ron. If I want to keep up, maybe I'll need 1,000,000 tries." Ron smirked, the glint of jest in his eyes as he replied, "Good luck with that," his tone playfully mocking. Their banter was interrupted by a messenger from the Familia Rugal Council, personally overseen by Aramis Kale, pronounced Ehr Amiz Kayl, Lord Eric's most trusted advisor. The young man bowed respectfully and handed Ron a sealed parchment bearing the insignia of Familia Rugal. Breaking the seal, Ron's playful expression hardened as his eyes scanned the contents. The message carried Lord Eric's instructions. The Sword King's decree demanded unwavering loyalty to the Malice Bloom. Neither the Blade Lords nor the broader estate could fully support their efforts concerning Malric Veilshade, pronounced Malric Veilshade. However, Lord Eric had entrusted Aramis Kale and the Council with the discretion to spare resources for the investigation, so long as it didn't conflict with the decree. It was a subtle but meaningful act of defiance, prioritizing his sons without overtly opposing the Sword King. As Ron lowered the parchment, disappointment flickered across his face. "The Council will help where they can," he said solemnly, "but it's limited." Father's hands are tied. Marcus stepped closer, determination burning in his eyes. "What does that mean for us?" Ron exhaled deeply, the weight of their circumstances pressing on him. "It means most of this will fall to us. If Kale and the Council uncover something, great. If not," he paused, glancing back toward the messenger. "Father's counting on us to figure this out." Marcus placed a firm hand on his brother's shoulder. "Then we'll do what needs to be done, with or without their help." As the messenger departed, the shadow of Malric Veilshade grew ever darker, but the bond between the brothers held steady against the encroaching storm. Charting the boundaries, Ron's insight and Marcus's naivety within the quiet confines of Windmere, the duo found themselves in deep contemplation. Ron, seated at the weathered wooden table, unfolded a worn map of the land, the boundaries of the 5 faction territories clearly marked. With practiced precision, he began flagging areas where the Sorrow Fiends had been reported, the ink bleeding faintly into the parchment. Across the room, Marcus, still energized from his sword drills, wandered over. He leaned over Ron's shoulder, squinting at the map. "Are we seriously planning to travel the whole continent? Looks like you're only marking the 5 territories." Ron sighed, shaking his head at his brother's naivety. "Marcus, you really don't pay attention, do you? It's a taboo to go beyond the borders of these territories. The supreme heads of all factions agreed. It's forbidden by treaty." Marcus raised an eyebrow, visibly surprised. "Oh, never knew that. Glad you told me." Ron shot him a sideways glance, his tone both incredulous and teasing. "Didn't you study with me?" Marcus scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "Ah, sorry. Wasn't paying attention. But seriously, thanks for telling me. I wouldn't want my head rolling on the ground for stepping outside the treaty's bounds." Ron chuckled softly, his earlier exasperation melting into amusement. "Just stick with me, Marcus. I'll make sure you keep your head right where it belongs." The brothers shared a brief laugh, their light-hearted exchange momentarily lifting the weight of their impending decisions. But as Ron returned his focus to the map, the shadow of the Sorrow Fiends once again drew their attention, the uncharted path ahead heavy with uncertainty. Connecting the dots, Ron's analysis and Marcus's curiosity, the table in front of Ron was a battlefield of scattered notes, hastily marked maps, and half-empty ink bottles. With a furrowed brow, he sorted through the mess, trying to make sense of it all. Marcus leaned over, peeking a piece of parchment Ron had just discarded. "So," Marcus began, "what do we have so far?" Ron sighed, picking up a report. "A lot of useless scraps, for one. Take this. Someone swears they saw a Sorrow Fiend lurking near a windmill. Apparently, it was spinning the blades." He raised an eyebrow at Marcus, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Sure, Marcus, maybe the fiends are tired of spreading sorrow and just want to produce flour now." Marcus snorted, trying to keep a sharp face. Multi-talented creatures, I guess. Then there's this one. Ron held up another sheet, his voice heavy with exasperation. Reports of Malric Veilshade riding a shadowy wolf through a forest at midnight. Dramatic? Yes. Helpful? Not remotely. Maybe he's starting a petting zoo, Marcus offered with a shrug. Ron shot him a look but smirked despite himself. And this, my favorite, apparently one of the luminaries was spotted, acting strange. No other details. Just strange. What am I supposed to do with that? Did they trip over their robe? Forget their line in a speech? Marcus laughed lightly but noticed Ron's mood shift as he tossed the papers aside. Okay, jokes aside, what do we actually know? Marcus asked, his tone softening. Ron straightened, his demeanor becoming serious as he pointed to the map on the table. This is where we focus. All the scattered nonsense doesn't matter if we can't connect the dots. But we do have 3 key leads. He marked the first point on the map with his quill. First, Malric Veilshade. Everything points to him being one of the 3 beings spreading the sorrow fiends. He's dangerous, and he's in this up to his neck. The next mark came quickly. Second, the luminaries. Their involvement isn't confirmed, but there's enough suspicion around them that we can't ignore it. Whether they're aiding Malric or working for their own ends, they're tied into this somehow. Finally, Ron gestured to the wide swaths of territory marked in ink. And third, the areas affected. Most of the Sorrowfiend attacks are concentrated in lands belonging to the Blade Lords and the Divinants. A few smaller territories have been hit, but those 2 seem to be the primary targets. Marcus nodded, his earlier amusement giving way to thoughtful contemplation. Why Blade Lords and Divinants? What do they have in common? Ron shook his head. I don't know yet, but until we figure that out, it's like chasing shadows. All we can do is focus on these 3 leads and see where they take us. The brothers stared at the map in silence for a moment, the gravity of their task settling over them like a storm cloud. The nonsense reports were a distraction, but beneath the clutter lay a thread of truth, one they had to follow before it was too late. Charting the map. Ron's recitation of the 5 factions. Ron spread the map across the table once again, his finger tracing the well-worn lines that divided the 5 faction territories. With practiced precision, he began to recite the divisions, a weight of familiarity in his tone. To the west, we have the warriors' stronghold, Ron began, tapping the edge of the map where rugged mountains bordered sprawling plains. Their lands are harsh, just like them. Strength and resilience define everything there. His finger moved eastward, pointing to the heart of the map. This is the Luminaries' mainland. Think of it as the cradle of intellect and mystical power. They control the flow of knowledge and influence far beyond their borders. Shifting south, he indicated the lower regions of the map. Here's the elementalists' domain, where the elements themselves obey their will. They've tamed deserts and jungles alike, creating a land as volatile as their craft. Ron paused as his hand moved to the north, where the lines blurred into unclaimed spaces. The north is complicated. It's a mixed territory, fragments of influence from all factions. 3 of the great powers hold sway here, the warriors, the luminaries, and the elementalists. It's chaotic, but also a battleground for control. Marcus tilted his head. And the other 2 factions? You're leaving something out. Ron nodded, a glimmer of respect in his voice. The Nomad Healers and the Eclipseborn. They don't have territories, never needed them. They're divinants, and their role in world decisions is absolute. No matter where they roam, their authority is recognized. They're not outsiders, they're equal to the factions with lands of their own. Marcus frowned, leaning over the map. That's because of the treaty, right? The agreement between the Supreme Heads? Exactly, Ron confirmed, his expression firm. It's part of the treaty. The Nomad Healers and Eclipseborn may not claim land, but their wisdom and judgment shape the course of this world as much as any territory-bound faction. It's why they're so important, and why no one dares undermine them. The brothers studied the map in silence for a moment, the weight of the factions' histories and politics settling over them. The boundaries, while clear on parchment, hinted at the deeper complexities and fragile balance that defined their world. Urgency of the Malice Bloom. Ron's resolve. Ron leaned heavily against the table, his gaze fixed on the map but his thoughts racing beyond its borders. The Malice Bloom, he murmured, his voice tense. The Sword King hasn't given a date, but the bloom is coming. We can't ignore it. If it arrives before we solve this, everything will spiral out of control. Marcus stepped closer, his brow furrowing as he studied the marked territories. But without a timeline, how do we plan? How do we prioritize? Ron exhaled sharply, his frustration evident. That's exactly the problem. The Sword King's decree makes the bloom the priority, but the Sorrow Fiends don't wait for schedules, they spread. And Malric Veilshade? He's out there, playing his part in all this. If we don't act now, the bloom might overshadow everything else, and then we'll lose any chance of solving this. Marcus placed a firm hand on Ron's shoulder, grounding him. We'll figure it out. Malric, the luminaries, the territories, all of it. You're right, though, we don't have time to sit and hope the council connects the dots. Ron nodded, his resolve hardening. The council will do what they can, but we need to start moving. Even if we can't solve the whole puzzle, we have to make progress. The bloom's arrival could change everything, not just for the factions but for the world. Marcus straightened, his twin swords gleaming faintly in the torchlight. Then let's focus on what we know. Malric, the luminaries, the targeted territories, we start there. Ron tightened his grip on the map, his determination unwavering. Agreed. The bloom is coming, but until it does, we fight back. For the factions, for the estate, for our family. The next step, Havenford and the pursuit of answers. Ron rolled up the map with careful precision, his resolve unshaken. Havenford it is, then, he said. If we're going to crack this case, we need to start getting direct answers, and Lola Mater, pronounced Lola Madur, the divinant, might hold the key. Marcus adjusted the grip on his twin swords, curiosity flickering in his eyes. What do we even ask her? Divinants don't just hand over secrets like candy. We ask her about the Sorrow Fiends, Ron replied decisively, his voice sharpening. And about Malric Veilshade, his movements, his intentions, anything she knows. Divinants don't operate blindly. If there's a connection, she might have seen it, or she might know someone who has. Marcus tilted his head, thinking. And the information brokers? You really think they'll have anything worthwhile? Ron shrugged, his tone pragmatic. If Lola Mater doesn't give us what we need, the brokers might. Havenford isn't short on contacts, it's chaotic, but it's where whispers turn into stories. Malric, the luminaries, the attacks, they might know where the threads meet. We just have to be willing to pay their price. Marcus smirked, his confidence returning. Then let's get moving, Havenford's waiting. And if there's one thing I know, it's that time isn't on our side. Meeting Lola Mater. Phelan Riversong's revelation. The streets of Havenford hummed with quiet activity as Ron and Marcus arrived at the dwelling of Elder Eldrick Vaughn, pronounced Eldrick Vaughn, a stately figure who bore the wisdom of ages in his gentle demeanor. The elder greeted them warmly, his hands clasped in a gesture of respect. Ron acknowledged him with a slight bow. Thank you for your message, Elder Vaughn, Ron said, his tone courteous but purposeful. We greatly appreciate your efforts in reaching us. Eldrick Vaughn inclined his head, his expression calm and knowing. It was my duty, young master. And I trust your journey here was uneventful? Ron nodded, exchanging brief pleasantries before his tone grew more resolute. We're here to speak with Lola Mater, the divinant. I understand she is under your care. Eldrick gestured toward the inner rooms of his dwelling. Indeed, she is. Lola has been expecting you. Come. Allow me to guide you to her. Leading them through a corridor adorned with relics and symbols of wisdom, Eldrick brought them to a serene chamber bathed in soft light. There stood Lola Mater, her presence as commanding as it was elegant. With graceful precision, she curtsied to Ron, her expression marked by composure and respect. I was informed of your arrival by Elder Vaughn, Lola said, her voice smooth and steady. I trust you seek answers. Tell me, what troubles you? Ron stepped forward, his tone measured but urgent. Lola Mater, we seek knowledge of Malric Veilshade and the Sorrow Fiends. Their spread is worsening, and we must understand the connections before it's too late. Lola studied him closely, her gaze sharp and contemplative. You ask much, young master. Yet the answers you seek may not all be mine to give. Still, I shall share what I can. Ron nodded slightly, choosing his next words with care. I'm aware of that, divinant. I just wish to share some of the information we've gathered. It might help, and perhaps you'll have some insights. Lola's brows lifted, intrigued. Very well, share what you will. Taking a moment to organize his thoughts, Ron began to outline their findings. He spoke of Malric Veilshade, the growing menace tied to the Sorrow Fiends, and the suspected involvement of the Luminaries. He detailed the patterns of attacks, territories belonging to Blade Lords and Divinants, and the strange gaps in the reports they'd received. As Ron spoke, Lola listened intently. Though impressed by his analysis, her curiosity deepened when she realized how little he was actually revealing. Ron had chosen to share only fragments of their findings, withholding anything he deemed irrelevant, foolish, or sensitive. His guarded nature was apparent in the way he carefully structured his words. "Your deductions are fascinating, Ron," Lola said finally, her tone thoughtful. "Though I sense you are holding much back. Do you distrust me?" Ron's gaze remained steady. "It's not distrust, Divinant. It's caution. Information is powerful, but it can also be dangerous. I'd rather be selective than risk sharing something that leads us astray." Lola inclined her head slightly, a faint smile touching her lips. "A wise approach, though your restraint limits what I might offer in return. Still, I see why you carry this weight. You tread carefully in uncertain waters." Marcus leaned in, whispering lightly to Ron, "Well, at least you spared her the nonsense about the windmill and the wolf." Ron shot him a brief look, though his lips twitched with amusement. Returning his focus to Lola, he added, "So, Divinant, based on what I've shared, do you have any insights? Anything we might have missed?" At this, Lola stood gracefully, her expression growing more serious. Allow me to reintroduce myself." She curtsied once again, her poise flawless yet her words carrying a deeper resonance. "My real name is Phelan Riversong, pronounced Phelan. I am a pilgrim under the covenant of Elementalist Lady Farah, pronounced Fey-Ra, a divinant mystic. My travels took me to historical sites tied to the god of elements and altars sacred to the Elementalist faction." Ron's brows furrowed slightly, intrigued but wary of where her story would lead. Phelan continued, her voice steady despite the weight of her memories. 2 years ago, my path brought me to the Eastern Territories, dominated by the Luminaries. I was not alone. I traveled with 5 companions, all pilgrims like myself. We were visiting these sites when we were branded heretics by the Luminaries. They claimed the world no longer needed knowledge of the old and declared our acts worthy of punishment. She paused, her expression tightening as her gaze drifted into the distance. We fought back, as they insulted not just our pilgrimage, but the covenant itself. It was a battle we could not win. They killed my comrades, one by one, until only I remained. I survived, but not without scars. I seek revenge, not against all luminaries, for I know not all are wicked, but against those who took everything from me." Marcus exchanged a glance with Ron as Phelan's tone grew darker. "I followed their traces, tracking them as they moved in secrecy. Eventually, I found one of their strongholds. There, I saw 3 men enter, a group of luminaries awaiting them. 2 of the men wore masks, but the third, he led them, speaking with authority as the others listened." Ron leaned forward slightly, his curiosity piqued. "And the masked ones? Did they notice you?" Phelan nodded solemnly. "They did. At least, I thought they did. Their glances lingered on me, but they seemed to ignore my presence. I hurried away, intending to seek aid from other Elementalist Covenant members. But before I could reach safety, I was knocked out. When I woke, I was bound, tied up in darkness." Her gaze locked onto Ron, her voice trembling just slightly. "A man stood before me, his face etched into my memory. He whispered, 'You will be a good host.' Then, I felt it, a terrible energy planted deep within me. It amplified every ounce of rage, every desire for vengeance against those luminaries who killed my comrades." Phelan fell silent, her breathing steady but her emotions raw. The room seemed to grow colder as her story settled over them like a storm cloud. The revelation and Ron's caution. The room remained heavy with tension as Ron slowly withdrew a parchment from his satchel, revealing the sketch of Malric Veilshade. He carefully unfolded it and held it out toward Phelan Riversong, his eyes watching her closely for a reaction. "Is this the person you mentioned?" Ron asked, his tone steady yet laced with anticipation. Phelan's gaze locked onto the image, her expression shifting in an instant. Her breath quickened, and her fists clenched as fury lit her eyes like smoldering embers. "That's him," she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "Malric Veilshade, the man who cursed me with this terrible energy." Marcus glanced at Ron, his brows raised in astonishment, while Ron leaned forward, his tone lifting with excitement. Where was the last place you saw him? He pressed, sensing the importance of her revelation. Phelan took a moment to compose herself, her voice steady despite the venom beneath it. I can take you there. Let me join your group. Ron's enthusiasm dimmed for a moment as he sat back, pondering her offer. His thoughts raced. Her knowledge was invaluable, but her motives carried weight, and he could not afford unnecessary risks. Finally, Ron looked back at Phelan, his voice firm but measured. Before we decide anything, I'd like to ask you something. What was the reason you hid your real name? Phelan exhaled softly, her expression tinged with a fragile honesty. Just like you, I no longer trust anyone. After everything I've been through, I don't even know if I can come back to the person I used to be. Revenge is all I cling to now. It's what keeps me moving forward. But Elder Eldrick Vaughn convinced me that you are someone worth trusting. Ron paused, her words catching him off guard. A faint smile touched his lips as he murmured to himself, so Elder Vaughn thinks highly of me? I'm glad to hear that. His curiosity grew as he fixed Phelan with a thoughtful gaze. Do you trust the Elder? He asked cautiously. Phelan hesitated, her expression deepening in thought. Then, with quiet resolve, she replied, he has an elementalist divinant on his side. Not just that, he has access to crucial information. While I was in his care, he shared something with me. He mentioned a young investigator working with him, someone trying to unravel the mystery of the Sorrow Fiends. She paused and leaned slightly toward Ron. You're also a divinant, Ron, and backed by one of the strongest Blade Lords. When I learned that, I knew I had to join you. We share a common enemy. You might not understand now, but my knowledge and drive will benefit your mission. Ron's gaze hardened, his voice carefully measured as he responded. Our mission is dangerous, Phelan. That much is true. We are warriors, yes, but we're not seeking revenge. Your personal vendetta against the luminaries who wronged you is not beneficial to us. What we need is clarity, focus, and trust. If you can give us that, then perhaps we can discuss moving forward. Phelan's emotions simmered beneath her composed exterior, and the room hung with a lingering air of uncertainty. The weight of their interaction pressed on Ron as he awaited her response, knowing that every ally and every risk could alter the course of their mission. The decision. Phelan's dilemma. Ron turned to Marcus, his expression unreadable. Excuse us, Phelan, he said, his tone polite but firm. I need to discuss this with my friend. Without waiting for a response, he gestured for Marcus to follow him outside the room. As soon as they stepped into the corridor, Marcus leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. Before Ron could speak, Marcus broke the silence. If I were her, I'd probably do the same thing, he began, his voice thoughtful. I get it, losing everything, clinging to revenge. But she seems dangerous, Ron. If we ride along with her vendetta, it could derail everything we're working toward. Ron raised an eyebrow, waiting for Marcus to continue. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. We're investigators, not avengers. If we start raising swords against the luminaries, it'll cause trouble, big trouble. The luminaries aren't just some random faction. If word gets out that we're fighting them, it could jeopardize our investigation and even spark conflict with the warrior faction. And you know how fragile things are between the factions already. He paused, studying Ron's face. But I know you, Ron. You've already made up your mind, haven't you? Marcus smirked, his tone shifting to something lighter. Fine, whatever you decide, I'll follow you, even to the ends of the earth. He added the last part with a joking grin. Ron couldn't help but smile at Marcus's loyalty. She's a survivor of possession, Marcus. I might learn something from her. Marcus blinked, then threw his hands up in mock exasperation. What? I was trying to give you some valiant, heartfelt advice, and all you're thinking about is that? He groaned, rubbing his temples before letting out a resigned sigh. All right, you win, but at least give me a better reason why she should join us. Ron's smile widened. Of course. She's a divinant, Marcus. She has knowledge from her travels as a pilgrim, and she can lead us directly to Malric. Once we reach him, we'll part ways with her. We won't involve ourselves in her revenge after that. Sounds good? Marcus hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Fine, but I'm holding you to that. The two returned to the room, where Phelan was waiting. The moment they entered, she dropped to her knees, her hands pressed to the ground in a gesture of submission. Let me join you, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. I will dedicate my life to you in your quest. I will even leave the covenants and join your faction. I will be your servant, your slave, if you wish. Her voice softened, and she added shyly, I can even be your wife, if that is what you desire. Her cheeks flushed as she glanced up at Ron, her beautiful face framed by tears that threatened to spill. Marcus's jaw dropped, his expression a mix of shock and awkwardness. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure of how to react. Phelan continued, her voice steadying. I will sign a contract, divinant to divinant. I will serve you. A contract is something only an elementalist can create, binding with one rule. If the rule is broken, the elementalist dies. Ron, who had already decided to let her join before re-entering the room, found himself surprised by the intensity of her offer. Still, he kept his composure. Fine, he said, his tone calm but firm. I accept the contract. But no, I don't need you to be my wife. He glanced at Marcus, who was still gaping, before continuing. The contract will be witnessed by Elder Vaughn and his elementalist divinant ally. The terms are simple. You will assist us in our investigation as an official part of my team under House Rugal. You will not seek revenge. You will abide by the rules of our faction, and if we encounter the luminaries you wish to kill, you will let me and my family handle it, especially Malric. It is for me and our faction to decide. Phelan hesitated, her resolve wavering. The terms struck at the core of her being. Revenge was what fueled her, what kept her moving forward. To give that up felt like losing the last piece of herself. She looked at Ron, her emotions swirling, but said nothing. Ron noticed her hesitation and added, You have 1 day to think it over. We leave tomorrow at noon, with or without you. Phelan lowered her gaze, her thoughts a storm of conflict. Revenge was all she had left, and Ron's terms seemed to deny her that. Yet she couldn't ignore the opportunity he presented, a chance to confront Malric, even if it wasn't on her terms. She needed time, but time was a luxury she didn't have. As the morning light crept into the room, Phelan sat alone, her mind racing. The decision loomed over her, and the weight of it threatened to crush her. For now, the brothers prepared for their departure, leaving Phelan to wrestle with the choice that could change everything. The contract. Phelan joins the team. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression thoughtful yet tinged with concern. So, if she accepts, what will you do? What were you thinking, Ron? You're seriously doing this for her? He paused, studying Ron's face. I know you, Ron. You're doing this to liberate her from her vengeance, aren't you? Ron sighed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I guess I can't hide anything from you. You got me spot on. His gaze turned distant, his voice softening. She's young, Marcus. Promising. She has a whole world ahead of her. Seeing someone gifted like her ruin her future for revenge, it's sad. It's a waste. He straightened, his tone growing firmer. But let's be honest. After everything we've learned, the Sorrow Fiends, the Luminaries, and Malric, we're bound to cross paths with them. And when that day comes, there's a chance it'll end in blood. If we meet the ones she seeks vengeance against, it'll be my blade that cuts them down. Ron's voice dropped, his resolve sharpening like steel. I made that decision long ago, Marcus. When I saw those parentless children, the wives who lost their husbands, the people whose dreams were shattered by the Sorrow Fiends. I promised myself I'd kill the ones responsible. All of them. Marcus swallowed hard, a flicker of unease crossing his face. But he nodded, his loyalty unwavering. All right, he said with a sigh. We're in this together. I'll cut them down with you. That's my promise as your blade. Ron glanced at him, grateful but unwilling to show it. Instead, he simply nodded, his focus shifting back to the task at hand. As noon approached, the brothers prepared their belongings, ready to depart. The tension in the air was palpable as they waited for Phelan's decision. Just as they were about to leave, a knock came at the door. Elder Vaughn entered, his expression calm but carrying a hint of satisfaction. Ron, the elder said, come with me. Phelan is with Sylvia, pronounced Sylvia, my divinant ally. She's ready to bind the contract with you. Ron blinked, momentarily stunned. What? Really? For real? He quickly gathered himself, a surge of optimism replacing his earlier apprehension. Audio note. End of chapter 18. Ready for the next one whenever you are.